Back then, people are all about fiber to the home, and people say, look, copper is a dead technology.
We try to come up with a prototype to prove our theory, because everything is still on paper.
They built this elaborate piece of hardware. This thing worked on paper. They were just trying to proof of concept. This could work in the lab, and it just wouldn't work.
There were problems, but they were all solvable.
There were lots of very talented people working, as it were, behind the scenes, just kind of bringing up and knocking out these problems one at a time.
It was just so compelling. It was so much better than any of the systems. There were other systems from AT&T Bell Labs, from Broadcom, from Northern Telecom.
So we basically had the technology, good technology, at the correct time.
We were all very excited when John approached us as a professor to students to work on various projects for our dissertation that has a opportunity really to allow people to really surf the internet at a much faster rate.
I met John a year, I think it was about 1990, a year before he formed AMATI. He was at Stanford. His grad students were working on this crazy idea called DMT, where you'd go throw 500 discrete frequency tones on a telephone line, and you could get megabits of data over copper wires that were built for voice.
Professor Cioffi asked me, would you like to apply my research work directly into something in the outside world, right? Which is probably what people would dream of. So without any doubt, without even knowing the salary or what I'm getting into, I said, of course. I'll join your company as soon as I graduate. So that's how it goes.
John Cioffi felt that he needed an expert in error correction. And so he asked some of his friends, and then they happened to know about me. So that's why he reached out to me. So I became the error correction expert at AMATI Communications.
Having the opportunity to consult there, I was allowed to work with some really, really smart people, John Cioffi, John Bingham, Pete Chow, Po Tong, Ron Hunt, Mike Aga. All these guys were just incredibly smart, really nice people.
John's strategy for starting AMATI and for forming a team is have a bunch of really bright grad students who work hard. They're enthusiastic. They're very willing to think out of the box, and bring one industry veteran into each of the key areas. And I love that formula. Worked great for AMATI. I've used that myself. So he said, I want Mark. I want Mark to come in and be the hardware guy for me. So I was sort of a year later when he formed AMATI, he reached out to me and said, sure, great. This sounds like a challenge. So I'm in. And I started as the hardware guy.
I knew about AMATI before I even got to Stanford, because AMATI had been involved in a big decision in the standards process where there were two competing technologies trying to be standardized for the DSL standard.
The AMATI approach was to chop up the channel into separate small sub-channels, and each sub-channel with a different frequency have a different signal to noise ratio, and we can make full use of that.
There was this competition, and they put a deadline in the sand and said, look, everybody's got to compete by such and such a date, and we're going to decide in March 1993 which technique we're picking.
So that's how I started to realize, yes, this could be a big deal, because look at all the company involved and the scale of this, right? This is something major. Like the whole world is watching.
A lot of times a startup company will come up with a better technology, but it's hard to get exposure, and it's hard to get deployment. And we actually loved the idea of an international spotlight on us. So should we be able to achieve our goals and get this thing working, theoretically we could blow away the competition. And we just loved the idea that there would be a demo and a publication in an international spotlight. Every startup should have that. opportunity.
AMATI absolutely crushed that competition and in a way made it impossible for the group to pick anything other than the AMATI solution.
That was really exciting for me to see the ideas that really germinated in the research to actually turn it into a product that has a potential, and then it actually demonstrated over years to reach millions of households.
I learned from AMATI really the importance of a small, tight team, and how the team was really led well. We pulled together well, and in the toughest moments, you really need to depend on your teammates. You need to support your teammates, and I think that experience shaped my management approach.
I think that the fundamental work that we did at AMATI and then later TI was a springboard in many cases for the multi-carrier technology generally to gain acceptance in a lot of different fields.
I took the opportunity to go to AMATI to help out on one hand, and on the other hand, I was able to learn a lot of signal processing from John and his students, from my colleagues at AMATI. So that was really exciting.
But it's really when we have multiple companies that express interest to acquire us. That's when I realized maybe what we have here are of significant interest to not just a bunch of students and a professor, but also to companies such as Texas Instruments and others who really think this is something with a bright future. And that's probably at that point I realized we're onto something that's actually going to make a big difference.
That really helps me to understand how a tech company works. It's not just kind of bury your head in the lab and just make something work. It's much more than that. Because yes, you could have the best prototype of product in the world, but if the world doesn't know, then sometimes you just miss the opportunity.